You're listening to the Young Talk podcast by First Church Young Adults.
What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of the Young Talk podcast. As usual, we have Paris, Sharan, and my boy Brandon. So today we're just gonna jump right into it. Talking about the waiting season, right? Or the rating room.
Oh,
I would say, right? Rating season, rating room. But to start this episode off with the question, I would ask, what's the longest time it has taken to receive an answered prayer from God? Or if it still hasn't been answered, how long has it been?
Ooh, I know one for me was 9 months.
9 months?
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole
long
baby.
time.
Yeah, it's literally a new birth, new you. Mine was for a healing specifically. That was a waiting period, and it was 9 months.
I would say maybe a year and a half. And that was just from getting me out of an uncomfortable situation to a new situation. Yeah.
Yeah, mine was 3 months. I consider it at the time, still consider it as a big decision in my life, because I sought my pastor about it.
Yeah.
So about 3 months, 3 to 4 months.
Man, I need the timing of Brandon. 3 months.
I would say, well,
I wish it all was
yeah,
that short.
that's pretty short. I mean, for me, the longest one I can think of, I didn't even know how long it would be. It was just something that, I prayed to God, God, get me out of this, and it took a while, right? But I would say it took almost a year.
Wow.
For that prayer to be fulfilled, right? Obviously, I feel like in certain prayers or certain processes in life,
Right.
you go through certain steps so that prayer is, completely fulfilled.
Correct.
So, for me, I would say, close to a year. But, yeah. So, moving on to the next one. Have you ever taken an answered prayer or opportunity from God for granted without realizing it?
Ooh, yeah, because you get comfortable. I think sometimes I think we have an answered prayer, and then we're like, okay, life is great now. I can just go on, do whatever I want to do. And then you just get comfortable.
Yeah.
I feel like times when I haven't had specific prayers for a situation, God will answer it, but I feel like my prayers weren't specific enough that I would have been able to recognize it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So God will answer a prayer, but I won't realize it because my prayers either weren't big enough, I didn't just talk to him.
Yeah.
I was too broad in my prayer, But yeah, I've definitely have missed answered prayers before.
Yeah, I agree. I've even been guilty of going back to the old routine before the prayer was answered.
Yeah.
And it isn't until I don't know, a sermon's preached or something, I don't know, and I'm like, I'm doing the same thing I was doing before this prayer was answered, and I feel obviously guilty, very bad about it, and I'm like, man. But in the event, grace covers you. You adjust and move on. So,
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
What
Definitely.
about you, Michael?
For me,
Hey, we are taking a break from this podcast episode to thank you so much for tuning in. If you're enjoying this content and if this is something that you would like to support, you can now give via the link in our description. Your contribution is so significant to us, and it helps us to continue to produce this content every single week. Our hope is to share this message of love, truth, and hope with as many young people as we possibly can. And you, with as little as $3 a month, can help us make that a reality. You can now be investing in our ministry. So, if you'd like to partner with us, hit the link in our description and we will make sure to give you a shout out in a future episode. All right, so let's get back to the content.
I feel like I have, and so what Sharan was saying, I really agree with that. And there's been a thing that I've seen, and it was we ask God for all these things, but sometimes we're we don't realize that we're actually living in an answered prayer sometimes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
true.
Right? And when I think about that, I'm like, man, You know, like even with, you know, this job that I just got, right? I never known that it was gonna be something like this, but I prayed for this like months back. And now that it's like being fulfilled, like even last week, I'm like, man, like with the schedule, this and that, and I had to check myself. Cause I'm like,
Right.
this is what God, you know, God answered my
He
prayer.
opened that door.
So why am I complaining?
Right.
You know? So that's why I'm just like trying to have this heart of like gratitude and like being thankful for like the opportunities that God has given me. You know, whether I think like for my, you know, my flesh might not like it in that moment, but this is what God has like put in my life for that prayer, for it to be fulfilled. It may not look like, you know, what I wanted it to be.
That's what I was gonna
right?
say. Like sometimes we think we know what to pray for, but then
yeah.
God's like, yeah, I'll give you that, but in a different way.
Yeah. So that's why sometimes I feel like we can miss it, right? Because we pray for something like specific or even broad, and He's answered it, but sometimes we just like God, when is this coming? When is this coming? But He's like, I've given it to you, you know, and you just gotta recognize it. And for me, I guess that's kind of like these past 2 weeks, like that's what I feel like my heart is at, is like being grateful, because even though I may not like getting up super early in the morning or like dealing with bad kids, you know, like but it's something that I know like God is gonna use to grow me, and I'm living in an answered prayer, right? But like I said, like in my mind, you don't think like you want it to be super specific.
Right.
Go ahead and give them a little context about your new job and what your goal was, just if so they
Okay.
don't know.
Yeah. So, so I recently graduated from the University of Houston with my bachelor's.
Whoop, whoop.
And go Cougs. And so my plan, I wanted to become like a PE teacher, and you know, have that as like my main, you know, source of income, and like do personal training on the side, and use that money to like start my gym, this and that. Like that was my plan, right? I had it all planned out. Like, all right, I'm gonna get this job, and then I'm gonna use this, X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Right. So I apply for the jobs, and I go to a job fair for the jobs that I applied for, and like from that day, like God just like rerouted my plans and just complained like, nah, like I'm trying to do something in you, right? And that's what I took it as. And during that, long story short, during the job fair, I received the opportunity that wasn't in that field, in physical education. It was in the field, you know, to still work at a school, but in a different.
In education.
Yeah, in education was math and like sped students, right? But they're not like, they're more on the level of like behavioral and
Right.
like slow learners, this and that, right? So when she was talking about it, I was like, you know, in my head, obviously a job is a job, right? So you think like first thing, like, man, am I gonna get paid? How much am I gonna get paid?
Right.
But I really didn't think like, you know, maybe it could be something like something
Greater.
bigger, greater could come out of this.
It's true because God had shut every other door that you had wanted, but then He
Right.
opened this door. So it's
Right.
like you prayed for a teaching job, but it wasn't.
Yeah. So right then and there, she wanted to hire me on the spot, but after we got to talking, well, I got the job the same day, but long story short, we got to talking more, and she seen that I was young, and she was like, all right, this is what I want you to do, you know, like go home, talk to your parents about it, whoever you need to, like let me know if this is something you want to do. So I'm like, man. So I walk out. At that point, the job fair was over. Like we was talking the whole time that I didn't even have a chance to really go talk to anybody else. So I'm like, all right. By the time we got done talking, all the tables were broken down, and I leave. And I'm like, man, school's starting in 2 weeks. Like that was my last chance. Like I either get a job or I keep looking. I either get to take this job or I keep looking. So I go in my car, call my parents, and yeah, they were like, you need to take it.
Yeah.
You know, like, and my mom, she told me, she was like, that's an answered prayer. And it may not be what you want it to be in that moment, but God is like probably rerouting you to something, you know. And then after that conversation, like I thought about it on my way home, and I don't know, like it was just like, man, like that's what I felt, was just like my mind had changed. Like, you know, it's not about what I wanted to do, but maybe like God is trying to use me to like make a difference in those kids' lives, you know, because they also need help too. So that's where, like in the last episode, I kind of talked about it a little bit, just kind of like helping and stuff. But
I can't wait for 5 years later. We're gonna be like, remember that one episode where God opened that door? And now you're in this part of your life. That's
So
what
that's-
You're a principal.
yeah, literally.
I don't want to be in education that long. But
Oh, you say that. You watch. God gonna
That's
be
what
like,
happens. Yeah.
That's true.
Okay, now it's recorded.
Don't say-
It's recorded.
Yeah.
We have the proof. 5 years, we're gonna Look
But
back
yeah,
and see.
so like that's why like I was just thinking about this episode, like the waiting season or the waiting room, because you know God has answered this prayer, right? So I'm in a season of like, you know, I want to like be still and just remain waiting, because I don't want to be so pressured and like, all right, God gave me this job. What's next? You know, like, nah, let me like soak all this in and like do what I'm supposed to be doing, you know, and just kind of just wait on the Lord.
Yeah.
And with that too, I had like a scripture that I wanted to share. It's Psalms 46:10. It says, "Be still and know that I'm God. I will be exalted among the heathen, and I'll be exalted in the earth." With that, I want to share Psalms 2. Psalms 38:15. Trust in His timing. That doesn't want to say, but that's what it's talking about. But for you, O Lord, do I wait. It is you, O Lord, my God, who will answer. So like with that, I'm just talking like with the prayer that I prayed, right? He answered that prayer. So the next one that like I don't want to be so consumed of like, all right, I pray for this, let me check it off. You know, like what's next? Like I just want to be still and just wait on God.
Yeah.
So that's what
That's
where I got this whole topic from.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
What are some things to avoid in the waiting season?
Giving up
Yeah.
and just stop praying about it, because your flesh just wants you to be like, bro, it wants to tell you like God doesn't want to answer this prayer right now, or at all like quit praying, that like that's stupid. But yeah, just keep praying about it. Don't just forget about it. And yeah.
I was talking to someone today, and they were saying how they were in a waiting season of between ministries. So they were heavily involved in a ministry, and now they're at a different church now, and so they're starting to get involved, but they're not as involved as they were at their other church. And so they were saying it's so weird in this waiting season because they're normally so proactive, but she realized in the waiting season she's needing to find rest and to recharge, and you know.
It's true.
So sometimes when you're in that waiting season, it may be a rest that God's given you that you don't even know.
Yeah. Brandon?
I think in the waiting season, it's kind of a combination, like what she told you to do. What I'm about to say is what she told you to do is call your your parents. Like, I think. So 1 Samuel like chapter 28 talks about like how Saul was the Philistines were waging war against Saul, against Israel, and you know God had turned away from Saul, and he was like, man, I don't know what to do. Samuel's dead, so he was like, I don't know what to do. So he calls upon this lady. She's a soothsayer or whatever, and he has her conjure up Samuel, and and the whole thing of it was about God's guidance not being there anymore because he turned shut off from Saul, and he was like, man, I gotta find the answer. I gotta do what I gotta do. Whoever I gotta listen to, whatever they're gonna tell me. So he gets that person to conjure up Samuel, and I think within the waiting season we have to be careful of where we're getting our answers from, and where we're getting our sources of how do you call it? I guess answers. I'll just go with
Yeah.
that. Just get our answers from the sources of where we get our answers from, because, of course, asking your parents, like asking your leadership, asking your pastors, like you can't go wrong. Go wrong with that, because they're our leaders. They're led by God. I believe so heavily, and but going outside that with Joe Smo down the road, and who doesn't really have a good track record with doing X, Y, and Z, some shady stuff. Just depending on what you're looking for, you have to be careful of of who you're going to for that counsel, for that advice, for suggestions. Of course, Saul went a whole different route, which was not wise at all. And I think with the waiting season, we have to be careful and be kind of wise and just wait. And it hurts. I think you were saying how some people, the lady, she needed rest. Maybe it's your rest moment.
Maybe God's teaching you patience.
Maybe God's teaching you
Right.
patience.
Be careful praying for patience.
Yes, like, but in it, like, yeah, I believe that whenever you're at a moment of in that season, acknowledge it. and don't run away from it. Meet it. My latest thing this past year has been meet it head on, mijo, and it's kind of like a play on the Spanish mijo, but like I've meet it head on. So every situation now that I faced, I'm meeting it head on. I'm going, okay, if this is a waiting season, I'm gonna meet it head on. I'm gonna wait. If this is one I feel like I need to like declare, I talked to Josh, one of our this coming semester, our worship nights for young adults is centered around proclaiming. So that's what we're going to do for the month of September is declare God's praises, declare praises to Him, His worship, declare His peace, love, His joy in our life, and that's just how I feel about it.
So,
that.
what do you guys do when you do get frustrated with God for maybe not answering a prayer? Like, if you reach the point of, like, you're just frustrated, you're angry at this point, at what point, like, what do you do at that point? What advice would you give to someone who is frustrated and just, like, how would you combat that?
I would say, for me, obviously, sometimes, like, when you get frustrated, even, like, not with God, but just people, like, you just get carnal sometimes. And with that, you might not, you might be so mad that you don't want to pray, or, like, you forget to pray. You're just like, man, I just want this to happen, this and that. But we don't realize, like, that's the answer to the source, is to pray, communicate with God. Like, God, but I feel like being, honest with Him. Like, God, like, I'm frustrated right now.
Yeah, that's
I don't know why, like, I feel like this, but I'm being frustrated. Like, can you give me the strength, like, give me the strength to endure this, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't want to get to a point where you're just so mad and you're just like, man, forget God. Like,
It's true.
Like, because you basically turning away from Him. So for me, it's just, remember, like, remember that you're grateful. Remember, like, why you're here.
Yeah,
So just always just, communicating with God, praying, like, being honest with God.
being honest. Yeah, that's good.
I would say, yeah, that'd be my main thing. Just be honest with God, because, the same way we could pray, like, God, help me with this, help me with that. Like, we give praises when good things go our way, right, to God in our life. So why can't we talk to Him when things aren't going good? Or
Right,
when we're
that's
frustrated
good.
with Him, So just be like, God, I'm frustrated. Help me get through this.
I find myself crying a lot in those times of frustration.
Yeah.
But something I always have to tell myself is, one, God will never leave you or forsake you.
Right.
Any weird, bad situation I've been in, God has always brought me out. There's not a time I can look back and be like, well, He really left me in that situation. Like, I had to fend for myself. No, not once. Never.
Yeah.
And so because of all those times that He's pulled me out of situations and brought me through, like, now when I do go through stuff, I still get frustrated. I still cry to Him. I still, get upset. But it's like, I already know. I already know He's going to help me.
Yeah.
So that's what gives me the peace of mind and at, those bad days where I'm like, oh gosh, I need
Yeah.
your help.
Well, I also think, like, I'm kind of answering my own question here. Just hearing y'all talk kind of brought an answer for me. I think sometimes you have to go through that frustration and go through that anger so that it will be a testimony for someone else. Like,
Right.
you're like, man, I went through a season in my life where I know exactly what you're feeling. I was angry, and I can say that for myself. Like, I went through a season, that my 9-month period that we talked about at the beginning, where I was just like, God, I'm so upset. Why haven't I healed from this? But then that later became part of my testimony and a revelation from God. So I think sometimes being okay with being frustrated is good, but also, like Micah said, be honest with God. God, I am angry. God, I am frustrated. You're just going to have to help me. So I think sometimes it's not, it's good to go through it so it can be a testimony.
So good. I heard a quote. It was T.F. Tenney. He said, sometimes God won't pull you out of the fire. I'm paraphrasing.
saw
It
that.
Yeah.
may not be the same. God may not pull you out of the fire. He may let you go through it,
Right.
So
It's
it's
true.
so true. I've gone through fires and I've been pulled out of fires. So that's life.
That reminds me of that little Craze line when he says, "You don't have to bring me out, just get me through to the end,"
Yeah.
or something like that. I'm like, what, Lecrae, that was
Yeah.
solid.
I think, too, like, while we're talking about this, the story of Job comes to my mind.
Yes.
Like, everything that he went through, like, if anyone was going to leave God, it could have been, or should have, not should
Yeah.
have, but it could have
mean,
been him.
yeah.
Like,
Very
all
well.
the things that he
Yeah,
dealt
yeah.
with, but he still remained faithful. And that's, like, that gives me hope. That gives me encouragement. Because I'm like, all right, if he can lose family, lose whatever, cattle, all that type of stuff, and still, like, put his faith in God. We see that he still got frustrated, right?
Yeah.
He still got frustrated, but God was trying to do a work through him to see if he's going to remain faithful during this season, right? Which would be our waiting season.
Yeah.
We'll get frustrated, we'll cry, we'll get mad, but God is like, hold on,
true.
keep your faith in me, and when you get through this, the outcome will be greater. He was blessed even more at the latter end of his years.
Right.
So just that's the story I like to think of when it comes about, losing things and trying to wait on God and trying to stay faithful.
That's so good.
Yeah. So I guess too with that, has there ever been a time if y'all were in Job's shoes, has there ever been a time where you feel like, obviously he remained faithful to God, but do you feel like there's been a time where your faith was just super weak or what?
Can't make story start.
Yeah, cut it. We had a long pause there. Michael's like, Michael, you gonna ask her? I'm like, are you gonna ask us a question?
Well, y'all just kept looking because you asked one. You had asked one.
And then my shoulders started shaking, and then I couldn't hold it in.
I was gonna jump in, but I was like, I didn't want to run
Yeah,
over
I
nobody.
was looking at Brandon too, because Brandon just said, "All right, we'll start over." All right. So with that, when you think about Job and stuff, obviously he remained faithful during that season. But for y'all, do y'all feel like there's ever been a time where you've been through a rough season like that, and your faith may have got super weak, or any time that you can think of, or maybe it hasn't got weak, but maybe something that you went through that was so strong that you had no choice but to have faith in God. I don't know where this is going, but put my faith in you.
Yeah. So for me, again, back to that 9-month period, I feel like I lost faith. And after about I was at the 8-month mark. I was like, okay, I don't know what else to do. What can I do different? Mm-hmm. And so then I did a month-long fast. And I was like, after that month-long fast is when God revealed so much to me. And then I did get my healing. And so I think there's power in fasting. That's a whole other thing we could talk about.
For sure.
But there was a period where I did lose faith, and I was like, okay, what am I going to do different? What can I do different biblically? What am I supposed to do? And so then I fasted, and after that time, God was able to speak to me in genuinely ways that I had never been spoken to from God before. So yeah, and that's how I combated that. My lack of faith was fasting.
Yeah.
So yes.
That's good. Anyone else? When do you feel like that, you've been through a point in your life where your faith was just super weak?
She pulled him.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I pulled a Brandon. He's always like, what was the question?
What was the question?
Probably gonna ask it again. Sorry.
No, for sure. Definitely. There was a time where I felt so broken. It was, God's the only reason why I'm here right now. I could have easily just walked away and just been like, no, people, these people hurt me. Church people hurt me, wow, I don't need to be in this,
Mm-hmm.
And it was only by the grace of God that I'm here. So, and that's the only answer I have, because I didn't have faith. I didn't have trust. It was just nothing. And then, that's it. It was just God.
I would say it's definitely on me. Why my faith was kind of weakened, because I was a victim of the whole comparison trap thing. I saw a lot of people that were praying for things, and that really wanted things to happen in their life, and it was happening. And I'm like, yo, we're on the same team. Yeah. I'm praying to the same God you're praying.
What about me?
Praying to, yeah.
Right.
And it's the whole what's
What
going
am I doing
on?
wrong?
Yeah, and it's no, it's definitely not the things that you're doing is just, God's timeline for your life. No one's life is going to look it's not going to look the same for each person. I had to understand that, that for myself, everything that I do is between me and God. Everything that they do is between them. It's has nothing to do with me. So I felt the prayers that I prayed, the fasting, the hope that I had, all those things were just for a season, it felt like for nothing. I just felt like nothing was really for me. I was like, why am I even praying then? Like, what's the point of all this? How you were feeling. But then I was like, I had to get back to the why we do this, to have a relationship with God, in the end is it's between he and I. So if this is our relationship, then I need to communicate, like what you were saying.
Right.
Communicate how I feel. And I kid you not, like the moment that I was like, you know what, God, like this is how I feel about what you've done in this person's life, like bless them, that's awesome, but like what what about me? And then he's just like, well, this is what you need to do. And I'm like, okay, cool. All right, that's all I need to hear. And once I got that clarity, that understanding of why he'll do what he wants, once I got the understanding of why he was doing what he was doing in my life, then I'm like, cool, it's fine. No more questions. Let's run. Let's go. Meet it head on.
That's good, yeah.
Meet
Yeah.
it head on. That's the title.
Meet
Meet it head on.
Yeah, everyone's on a different path for sure. But that's also like another episode. I feel like comparing your life to other people's lives.
Right.
But
It's dangerous.
Yeah.
to answer my question, I would just say there was a time where I was going through something and I was being like stubborn, right? Like I wouldn't, I'd pray, but I wouldn't like. I'd be like, God, all right, obviously this isn't gonna happen. I'm going through this and going through this. Where at a time where I would just come, this was like a couple years back, where I would just come sometimes and I would just try to go through the motions, but
Not be proactive.
yeah, not be proactive, just kind of do the bare minimum, like come to church, like go through the routine, and then like even without even, trying to raise my hands for real, like God's presence was just heavy on me, like pushing me, pulling out my heart, like come on, like stay with me.
Right.
Yeah.
And through that, like that's what helped me, like God kept me for real. But with that, it just gave me hope, because I could still feel him in my darkest moments, and he got me through it. So
Yeah.
that's why I look back at those moments and I'm like, like God got me for real.
God got me for real. That needs to be the
God got me for
God
real.
got me for real.
So to wrap this episode up, we talked about a lot about the waiting season. If you could give advice to anyone when they're in the waiting season, what would you say, or what should they do?
I like what you said. Don't stop. Don't give up. He's got you.
I would
Yeah.
say meet it head on. Don't.
No.
No, but in all honesty, do it. I mean, like, if you understand, you have to be aware and know that you're in that season. But,
Yeah.
when you do, when everything just feels like, just pulling teeth, nothing's happening, meet it head on. Like, don't shy away from it. Pray. Be aware of your, like, how we were talking about your emotions, your feelings. Your emotions are just who you are. Don't be ashamed of having the frustration. Don't be ashamed of, like, having the doubt. Don't stay there, and have your moment and then go. Like,
Right.
Meet it head on.
Amen.
That's great. I think Brandon wrapped it up perfectly.
Yes. Meet it head
right.
on.
All right, y'all. Before we close this out, I want to read a scripture to y'all to close it out. In Psalms 27:14, it says, "Wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and he shall strengthen thy heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord." So we hope you enjoyed this episode. Please tune in to the next one. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. We out.
Thank you for listening to the Young Talk podcast, where we talk about Christ and culture. We upload a new episode every Friday, so see you next week.